game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
No. There. Alright, let's try that. What's happening, everyone? It's Jack Moves here. No one asked me to make this video, but it's just such a frequent obsession of mine to talk about or to think about practice and honing skills. I do it more than anything else. You could ask anybody who knows me, they can verify that. I'm usually at my practice space where I film my videos, working on any number of things. This is the best time I've ever had in terms of working on my skills and being focused. And I just wanted to share some of my things that I've learned with you so that hopefully it can help some other people sort of get out of a rut or decide to try a new skill where previously they might not have thought they had enough time or enough talent to do. So I'll try to do it as a top, I don't know, I have like 6 things written here, so maybe a top 6, maybe it'll be more, I don't know. I'll try and do it quick too, because I know everyone's attention span is like 1 minute and 45 seconds or something. But anyway, first thing I would say is not to downplay yourself. That would be the first thing. So probably the most common thing that I hear people say when I'm talking about singing, whatever, and even when they haven't heard me sing, they don't even actually know, you know, how good I am at it, if I am good at it at all. I just tell them, it's like, yeah, man, I like singing, I'm good at it. They usually, I'm always amazed. People will say, like, I could never sing, I could never, you know, or if it's guitar, because I play guitar too, you know, it's like, oh, I always wanted to do that. And then you just got to ask yourself what, you know, a lot of times it's no coincidence that the person who says that, when I ask them about what they do, it's usually some either really convoluted job that is difficult to define. They're a, you know, consultant, some mysterious consultant doing consulting things. They're an administrative position or a job that just plain sucks, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't like what they do a lot of times, and you just got to ask why you wouldn't try to break out of that, to do something that you feel you would enjoy. And then perhaps the answer is it's too much effort, it requires too much of you, you don't have time. You need to realize the extent to which negative talk or how much your mind will get in the way of getting you to do something. When you put those barriers in front of yourself, if you're anything like me, pretty much anytime you think of doing anything, I want you to notice how often another part of your brain comes in and says, now hold on, before you do that, what about thus and so, this, and this. A frequent one for me was always money. You can't afford to be spending this much time working on music. You need to find ways to make money, to have some stability. You know, you should be whatever number of expectations should be there. You should be thinking about buying a house. You should be investing. You should, you know, be proposing to your future wife, whatever it is. There's always going to be something that you're going to place there. So often what happens when I'm talking to people is they'll say, oh, I'd love to do that, but this, and this. These are things which you're placing in front of yourself. I know that a lot of this is fairly self-evident, and I'm not really reinventing the wheel when I'm talking about this, but perhaps my perspective can be worth something. Just realize the extent to which you put these boundaries in place. And then if you really want to do something, you start with the smallest possible block you can have. You have to start really small, otherwise no action will be taken. Like, for example, this video, I had these visions in my head. I've been thinking about doing this for a little while. I had visions in my head of doing something with like a big quality video, break out my SLRs, show you examples, make it this like really big holistic learning thing. And then I realized I would just never do that. I don't want to do it that bad. So here I am, before I teach a lesson, talking about it, and I've got my iPhone precariously placed on my dashboard, because I do want to communicate it, but this is about as far as I'm willing to go. So start with something. All right, so let's say you wanted to play, I'm going to talk about arts because it's what I know best. It can apply to anything. Let's say you wanted to play guitar for the longest time. Why don't you buy a guitar? Okay, here's the first thing people will say: I don't have the money. Okay. Cheap guitars can run as little as $150 from a music store. It won't be great, but it'll be something. If you don't have a guitar, at least you'd have a guitar. You gotta have a guitar to be able to play. You can't afford that. What about you rent it? You rent it from Lon McQuaid or wherever you're at. You rent it from your music store. That's often an option. And that's $50 a month, let's say. Or you can't afford that. All right. Who do you know who has a guitar, who doesn't play it, is willing to lend it? And I'll just say this: anybody in the Toronto area, if you feel this way, you don't have any money, seriously, talk to your boy. I've got an extra one. I'll loan it to you, and I'm not fucking joking. So there's always a way to start with that, okay? And then everything builds from that. You take lessons if you feel like it. You take one song that you figure is pretty easy. Even if you don't take lessons, you figure out that one song or figure out that one part. One of the first things I wanted to learn on guitar was that lick in Back in Black. The lick. I wanted to learn it for the longest time, so that was the first thing I did, and it was just like literally that section, which on its own is like a 2-second selection. You have to build on that. If you're already thinking like, I want to be amazing at this, your concept of that is going to be too grand, and you're never going to do it. So you've got to start very small, like probably way smaller than you even think. All right, I got to speed things along here. Okay, check out meditation. That usually, depending on the person, although I feel that moods are changing, impressions are changing of that kind of what meditation's all about, it still sort of seems like it's some really fluffy stuff to a lot of people. It's helpful to understand what meditation is in the broader sense, as opposed to a Buddhist master sitting in the lotus position, channeling things, some kind of mystical belief that people have as to what meditation is. Meditation, in my definition, is I think I'm actually stealing this from somebody, but doing one thing at a time. This is difficult for people to process, especially when we've been taught that multitasking is a virtuous thing. I am of the belief that doing several things at once is not even actually possible, even when you're doing it. Like, you ever had a conversation with someone who's in the middle of answering a text message, or you're the one who's answering the text message? If you've been that person, unless you've got some incredible mental faculties, you might notice that you often have to ask whoever's speaking to you to repeat what they're saying, and then you start the whole thing over. Now, meditative practice can be applied to literally everything that you do, every experience, and the way that plays in to practice and honing a skill is you have to consider the mechanics of everything. There's probably like 50 points to a golf swing that you could go and individually pick apart, and you need to know what each of those feel like, because if you don't, you won't be able to get the bigger picture together. So I'd encourage you to check out a little bit about meditative practices. I'll link to a couple videos from a couple sources that I found helpful and relatively practical, less on the new age spiritual side of things, although that can be helpful too. and just consider the importance of focusing on doing one thing. It doesn't matter how mundane that thing is. In terms of playing an instrument, you could literally be talking about pressing down a fret on the guitar. What does that feel like? What does it feel like with my middle finger? What does it feel like that? It can't get too small. It can't. Is it slow? Hell yeah, it's slow. And this brings me to my next point, which is, you got to bear through you got to bear with your suck phase when you suck. You got to get through that suck phase. Okay? So when you're learning a new skill, you're going to do it poorly at first. You might be a quicker learner. You might get out of that sooner than later. But ultimately, everyone's gonna, it's not gonna be up to your standards at first. So first of all, you just gotta abandon standards anyway. It's a process, and it doesn't really stop. Practice. You might accomplish a particular task, but it's never really done. So recognizing that, notice when you've made progress. So simple example, let's say you're going through something, you're going through an exercise or a group of chords on the guitar, and you were only able to go through it once. The progression, let's say 4 chords, you can be able to go through those 4 chords. You did it one time, then you mess up when you're going back to the repeat. It's too much to remember. You get to a point where you just managed to get that next chord, so you play through 5 chords at this point, and then you mess up. But recognize the progression, however small. Or I found this from practicing drums recently. It's like just convincing your body physically to go and place the snare hit in the place that's the one thing that you're missing. That's the thing that you're practicing. When you can actually do it, man, that is a shitty snare hit, but it didn't exist before. You weren't able to do that. You weren't able to convince your body. But now your body, just however unwillingly, is finally placing it in the spot, and it's only going to get better from there. Is it going to be slower than you expect? Yes, it probably will. Unless you're a very, very a person who's very at peace with things and not and devoid of expectation. You just gotta grin and bear it and go through that phase. Along those lines, time management was another one. Time management, people will say, I don't have time for it. People who I teach music to will say, oh, I just didn't have time. I'll have 8-year-olds tell me that they didn't have time. I'm willing to bet that even people in extremely time-consuming, demanding lines of work, lawyers, doctors, whatever, can find 5 minutes a day. I find it hard to think that anyone can't find 5 minutes a day to do whatever. So then you got to focus on what can you do. So you're going to learn that through practice. You're going to learn what can you actually slot in, let's say you have 20 minutes. Let's say you have 20 minutes. What can I do that's productive? You want to stay on that one thing. If it's a small period of time, you're going to get a good idea after a while what works and what doesn't. So for me, if I have 20 minutes, I'm probably not going to sit down and try and learn a song on drums or learn a song on the loop pedal or whatever. Or if I have 2 songs I have to do, I'm of course going to take the easier of the 2 and break that one down first in that 20-minute period. You don't want to jump into something that's beyond your capability, because again, if you overshoot and you don't successfully get the task completed, then that's going to have an effect on your morale. So be very reasonable with yourself in terms of what you choose to focus your time on. A lot of the gains, and I feel like that applies when I say gains, I was also thinking about it in terms of weight training too. I, on a very, very amateur level, did some weight training when I was younger. More just to get more into fitness and whatever. My experience with that is much the same with practice. Gains are not, once you've achieved something once, it doesn't necessarily, it will take more time for it to become part of the fabric where you can definitely do it. If you can bench, whatever, if you can bench 2 plates, 2 times, and you manage to do it the first time, and then the next day you come back and you can only manage to get 1 rep, and then you're totally crushed. The world doesn't make sense. Okay, maybe this analogy isn't perfect, but I think it still works. I think so. I don't know. With practice, you may be able to reach a given goal, but it's still a bit uneasy. It doesn't necessarily fit because it's new. So you might not get it in a day. I think that absolutely perfecting something in a day doesn't really happen. I feel like you have to sleep on it. I was really influenced by a video I saw John Cleese. A lot of you may have seen it. A talk he gave a little while ago, talking about the value of stepping away from your work and allowing some kind of subconscious processes that we might not even really understand taking effect, and putting it through that until it just becomes, again, part of the fabric. It becomes part of your language. It becomes part of your vocabulary. Like, I think it was Charlie Parker who said, learn the notes and forget them, or if not him, some other jazz person or jazz professor. You learn the language just to such a great degree. It's just the same way as I'm talking to you. I use it so often that it doesn't even require much thought, if at all, anymore. So let's see. Was there anything else? Let's see. Just know when to take a break. Know that if you go hard for a while, you will eventually reach a point where, even though you're trying, you're not getting anywhere. That's when you just take some time off. I find that it could be a long time, it could be a short time. For me, sometimes it can be 30 seconds where I just stare at the wall. I try not to have too many distractions. And as an aside, as a very big aside, avoid distractions at all costs. Turn off the phone, put away the computer, all that stuff. The amount of momentum you lose, and the amount you have to reorient yourself after you've interrupted whatever it is you're practicing, the amount of time you have to get back into the groove after you've answered the phone or whatever, is, I'm pretty sure, has been empirically shown to be a substantial chunk of time you've lost the wave. You got to get back on. So give yourself an unbroken period of time. And this relates back to the meditation thing. You really want to just maintain that focus on one thing. So we'll see if I actually keep this video. It definitely went beyond the 1 minute and 45 second mark. We'll see. I'll look over it. If you're seeing this, I hope it's helpful to you. I sincerely would love to see more and more people who I know, or but just people in general. I'd like to see them work towards their passion to actually do things that they want to do, and make the most of their lives, because the alternative isn't really worth it. So that's it. Subscribe to the channel. Blah, 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 blah.